What's up, everybody? It's Noah, back again with another episode of the Thought Bubble series. We're on episode 10, which is kind of insane on low. Not that I didn't expect myself to get here, but I think I've found like a pretty consistent groove when it comes to like making these videos or like kind of putting these entries in like my like virtual journal per se. But happy that we're here. We're in the double digits now, so that's pretty cool. Um, I guess like for the tangent of the day, because I can never stay on track with any of these videos. It is quite windy where I'm at, so if you hear like the gusts or like my like rattling in the background, it's the wind. Sorry. There's birds too. I don't. I it it just be going on. You know what I'm saying? Stuff just be happening outside my house. But anyway, today is something that I've kind of talked about in the past, or let's just say like not on this channel though. So to give like kind of like context for everything first, I had the honor and pleasure of getting to sit down and talk to a man called Preston. His at is Preston Rack on Instagram. Um, he kind of the goat for real. His whole account is basically him sitting down with random people in person and traveling to like a bunch of cities and then basically asking and hearing people out on their perspectives on love and relationships and like pretty much anything under that umbrella. And so I had ended up catching wind that he was coming to where I live, my city in Honolulu, Hawaii. And I was kind of just like, this sounds like a cool opportunity. And I saw the story and I was like, you know what? I've been following this guy for a while and I think he makes some really good stuff. And I was like, F it, let's do it. So I ended up filling out a Google form that was linked on the Instagram story. And I was kind of like just filling it out. And part of it was almost like a cathartic exercise for me. I think like part of me like was kind of just like maybe if this like goes somewhere then like I end up talking to him, but it was more so like as an exercise for me about having a topic that I kind of care about, or like my take on relationships, et cetera, which we'll get to later in this video. But I wanted to get my take, and I was just like, you know what, just let the thoughts roll for like 10 minutes, just write everything down that I want to say, basically say what I want to say, kind of like similarly to how these videos work. And I just sent it in and I didn't think anything of it for like weeks, I think, or like a week or two. And then so I was kind of just minding my own business. I went out for a dinner with a friend, got a couple of drinks, you know what I'm saying? But I ended up getting a text from his producer, whose name's John. John's really cool, by the way. John's a goat. He'd a go for real. But basically, they were like, "We loved your response. Do you want to come out and talk to us about it?" And I was like, geeked. I was tweaking. I can't even lie, because like I didn't expect anything to come of it, and for them to kind of like what I had to say, and I was just like, you know what, sure. So found the time, like basically got off of work and then just like sprinted it down to the filming location, and we end up having a good time. And I kind of like just end up voicing my opinion. I don't know if like I'm not really much of an editor, as you guys might know, but I'll probably like put a link in the description to like the story of what exactly my take was during that time. But basically, that's gonna get to the meat and potatoes of this video, because I really wanted to kind of rethink and like reiterate. I don't know if it'll end up with me reiterating the same points, but basically, my take on it was that comfortability is not a kind of indicator of a healthy relationship. And the reason I said that was because I think a lot of times when you think about relationships, you think about comfortability or being comfortable with someone as kind of like a positive thing. You know, when like someone tells you, "Oh yeah, like I'm comfortable being around this person," like you don't really think that it's like a really negative thing per se. But for me in my past, I had a lot of instances where some friends or people that I knew of had a lot of hard times with people who they felt comfortable around, because a lot of times they would constantly have disagreements or like be treated unfairly in the relationship. And so a lot of times I would kind of like be talking to them and like not to say like be like the toxic friend where it's like, you should leave him, like he doesn't deserve, or yada yada. You know what I mean? But like basically it's like if you have all these issues with said person, like why do you continue this relationship, or like why do you want things to stay the way they are? And basically, kind of the responses that came back to me was either like I don't know, or like it just feels familiar, or it's comfortable, or whatever. And it like kind of didn't register in my brain for a long time because, of course, like I mentioned, right, when you say comfortable, usually it's a positive thing and not a negative thing. But so I kind of didn't understand until I ended up experiencing it in my own life, where a lot of times, or not a lot of times, it was kind of just one instance where I was like good friends with this person, and then I think I consistently kind of moved my boundaries back in terms of like, whoa, the gust is going. But like basically, I kind of like, it goes back to like the expectations part of like that video, which was, I forget which episode, but it was hard for me to have like expectations on people or on my friends, so I didn't really expect anything of it. But like there's kind of like some small like minimal things where like they would cancel plans last minute, or they were not being really straightforward with me, and I was like, oh, it's fine. And like, you kind of really want like relationships to work, especially if you're like a people pleaser type of person. And so a lot of times I was kind of just like accepting things, and it'd be kind of it me accepting less in terms of emotional fulfillment, in terms of like physical fulfillment, whatever it is, whatever it may be, right? Like, when you kind of keep moving boundaries back and you become comfortable with that, with like accepting or being less, then it kind of just like feels comfortable. And in a sense, like, not just like you get used to it, but it's also like you're kind of scared to like break out of said loop of kind of just getting hurt, or like not having your needs met, because a lot of times it's kind of like scary doing the unknowns, which is a whole another topic that like I kind of want to discover a bit more. I don't know if I've touched on it a couple times. I probably have, but basically I feel like a lot of times we're scared to like go out of our comfort zone and try, just because it like feels awkward, right? Or like there's a lot of risk to it. You're going into a lot of things that are unknown, and you have no clue what's coming next, and that is pretty scary. I will admit it is quite scary. But that was the whole premise of my take. And like I still feel kind of the same way, in the sense that like, a lot of times I think people can become comfortable in relationships that are toxic. And when you have a lot of things that you feel like are kind of like, you just kind of keep moving that boundary back and accepting less and less and less over time, it kind of becomes your new normal. And so I guess what I wanted to explore more is kind of like what happens after that, because I think it is quite hard to like get out of that loop where you're consistently just kind of like, oh yeah, this is okay, or this is okay, or kind of just like people pleasing in a way. And a lot of times you can kind of just become like that. If that becomes your new normal and you kind of get stuck in it, then you kind of have a hard time getting out, and it's really hard to get out. And so what worked for me was a lot of deep talks with my friends. I think it helps. It can be either a friend or a family member. I think a really key point is just like voicing your opinions or concerns anytime they come up, and just not accepting it and just moving on. Like if something really irks you, like, and you don't want to like be direct because that's not your confrontation style, or you don't want to be like straightforward confrontation, you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes it does help if you have like a family member or friend or both, whatever. But basically have an outside opinion of somebody who's not involved in the situation, and then kind of explain your thought process to them. Because a lot of times, if you once you're in like kind of like that loop, or like that situation where you're kind of just like okay with accepting less, then you don't really realize that you actually are, and that all of these things that are going wrong are like not acceptable, and like you should talk about it. And if they're not willing to compromise, then dip. You know what I'm saying? Like it helps a lot just to have a lot of outside opinions, because that was what helped me. um in my case, when I was like dealing with this sort of thing, where I was kind of like talking to my friends about it, and a lot of them gave me a lot of insightful opinions, and that was kind of helpful for me too. And I'm pretty lucky to have friends like that. But, you know, getting an outside opinion is definitely helpful, because I think the same thing goes for like when you're writing like a paper, right? Like getting a new set of eyes on it, like you might not see anything wrong with the paper, but when you get someone to review it, either like a classmate or something like that, you'll notice that like a lot of times there's like misspellings or grammar or stuff that doesn't make sense, or like even in stories like plot lines don't make sense. So I think that's like super super helpful in a way to like get out of it. And then I think what helps too is just like kind of what I mentioned earlier, which is like just being proactive. Like if something is irking you, don't just like accept it and like move on and just push it to the side and like, oh, it's okay, like, because either two things I think are going to happen. One is like you just feel bad generally, right? And you just feel bad constantly, or you get used to it and you kind of just don't get your needs fulfilled. And then it builds up over time. And all the small stuff that you kind of said was like, yeah, I'm okay. And you just push it to the side. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse over time. And it kind of just builds up to like a breaking point when, it's kind of like just shaking the bottle with a Coke in it. You know what I'm saying? Like it just builds up and then the outfall is like quite bad and it can a lot of times be worse. So I think being proactive and just like voicing your concerns, and then if the other party is not willing to hear you out on these things, if they think it's like not important, then said person, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a romantic relationship, I think that person is just not for you and you should get out, brother. Get you know what I'm saying? Like it should always be like a two-way street. And if both like one side's not willing to compromise with you, then it's like not, I don't think it's worth pursuing. So that's kind of like the get out of things part. It is quite hard though, because I think a lot of it, at least the point two about like kind of getting stuck in this loop of being comfortable in toxic relationships, a lot of it kind of stemmed from how I've dealt with like mental illnesses in the past. Because I've had, I think on two occasions, kind of like episodes of pretty bad anxiety to the point where like I like couldn't go to school bad. Um, and a lot of times it was kind of just like self-perpetuated in the sense of like, you wake up and you're like, dang, today's like such a bad day, like I feel bad, whatever, whatever. But it's kind of like one thing that my therapist told me that like was kind of nice to know was basically that like you're kind of putting yourself in this situation. And even if you gotta like kind of just like fake it, because what happened is I basically became comfortable being sad. And so because that was like kind of my new normal, I kind of just like woke up feeling bad every day. And so what you kind of almost have to do, at least in the mental health aspect, was for me was kind of just like faking it till you make it. In this case, don't fake. If it's like a relationship thing, do not fake it till you make it, because like that's not how it works. But at least for like anxiety, depression, that's what can help me of like wake up and be like, instead of being like, dang, today's being a bad day, like do the uncomfortable thing and say like, hey, today's gonna be a great day. I'm gonna try something new. I'm gonna go like get some new restaurant, try new food, try new cuisine, go bowling or something like that by myself, go on a like solo vacation or something like that. You know what I'm saying? Like I think trying to do something that's like breaking you out, that's like not comfortable, and just like basically I think the equivalent of what I'm trying to say in this case from the anxiety case over to like the relationships case would be um I think in that case, let's say you kind of get stuck in this like loop of like just like pushing your boundaries back and not being fulfilled in your relationship. I think a really key thing that um is to note, or I guess like to try, is just like if part of it I think is like getting outside help, but like if you want to try and do it by yourself, I think a lot of it is critical thinking of like, why am I moving my boundaries back? Is this something that I'm like compromising on and I feel comfortable with compromising on? Or is it something that I'm just moving back because it's convenient for me, like to not arise like a conflict or something like that? I think that's one thing that is kind of equivalent. I guess like another thing, how do I want to say this? Like, I think that it's not really like a fake it part, but it's more so I think the idea of, instead of just like accepting things the way they are and like accepting less than what you're worth or what is fulfilling for you, instead kind of just like question it, and then like if it isn't fulfilling for you, then like push the boundaries, or don't be afraid to kind of like ask for more, or like say, hey, can we compromise on like said thing, or like for scheduling, for example, right? Like if we agree to go, like if you don't actually want to go to this thing, just tell me, something like that. Like being able to come to like that sort of like compromise, instead of just like basically staying silent and just sticking into like this, like, oh, I just have to do whatever X person says. Like I think that's like super super important, and that's kind of like the tie over that I had. It's kind of hard. It's still like something that I've kind of thought about, but I think the main idea is like trying to avoid the problem of like getting stuck in kind of like this negative feedback loop, like before, like get ahead of it before it starts. And then also, if you feel like you're kind of stuck in it, try asking like a friend or something like that, or some outside party to kind of give their opinion on things. I think that will also help you. So I guess that's kind of most of my points on that topic. It was really fun actually, like getting to go over and talk to them, because I think one thing that I noticed, at least in the videos from what I was able to see, is a lot of it is really, really genuine. Like it's real people giving their real testimonies, and everyone who's a part of that crew is really, really cool. At least the ones that I met, and I'm sure that the people who were like video editors or that I didn't get to meet are also super, super cool people. So I'll throw that video down below. But I guess in summary, of the topic of being comfortable in a relationship doesn't necessarily mean it's a healthy one. Of course, you can have healthy relationships where you are comfortable with the other person, and that's fine. But I think I'm talking more so of a sense of it can be a double edged sword where there are times when you're kind of just comfortable with not being emotionally or like basically not being fulfilled in a relationship. And so in those cases, it's really, really important that either you kind of ask for maybe an outside opinion or sit down with whoever like you feel is like, I don't know if like not meeting your emotional needs, but like basically wherever the conflict is, like either tackle it head on or like maybe get an outside opinion. I think that's important. But I think the really, really, I guess, key takeaway is just to not accept less than what you deserve. You know what I mean? Like everyone deserves to have their emotional needs fulfilled, physical needs fulfilled, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So make sure that like if anybody, like whether it's a friend or a romantic partner or like even family members to some extent, if you like if they're not fulfilling you, or like if they're actively like taking away or draining your energy, like don't just accept it like just because it's convenient, like you are valuable intrinsically, and always make sure that you're not accepting less for what you deserve, which is what you want. You know what I mean? But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It's a bit longer, I think, than usual, but hope you guys liked it. If you did, like the video, subscribe, you know the drill. Leave a comment if you have an opinion on it, or if you can go watch the original video too if you want to leave a comment there. But yeah, I think that's going to be it for today. Thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.